Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. As you can tell right here, if you're watching the YouTube channel, please feel free to call me Sully. This show is available on the free and easy-to-use Odyssey app, and we are now on YouTube for those of you watching us right now. This episode is being dropped audio on the 30th of August, 2021. The video, I think we may even drop a little bit earlier. I'm going to be bringing on the fan favorite and someone who is slowly but surely becoming the voice of Locked On Baseball here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the brilliant Jeff Carr. But before we talk that, I'm going to tell you this show is available wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have a smart device, be sure to tell it to play podcast Locked On MLB, or check out some of the other great shows on the Locked On Podcast Network, including Locked On Fantasy Baseball with Scott Cullen. And hey, why not Locked On Reds with Jeff Carr? You can follow our show on Twitter at Locked On MLB Pod, same handle on Instagram. And you can follow me. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Well, at one point in the season, I brought this man aboard because I was like, man, they're off to a great start, and then we better get them on while it's good before things get bad. Well, guess what? Things remain good. In fact, as of this recording, the Cincinnati Reds are a playoff team. And so coming aboard to talk about what I think has been a wild turnaround, and even though this would be their second straight trip to the postseason, I think everyone would admit this is a little unexpected right now. Coming onto the show, host of Locked On Reds. Hey, take a look at him. It's Jeff Carr. How you doing, buddy?
Sully, it's good to see you, man. And yeah, it's been one of those years when it comes to the Redlegs. There's been a lot of highs and a lot of lows. And right now we're in the middle, I think. But it's nice that they are actually in a playoff spot at the moment.
Yeah, I have to say, I didn't think they were going to be bad this year. They made the postseason in the truncated season with the extended playoffs. Of course, they lost Trevor Bauer, and that is the last time I will mention that topic. But you take a look at this team, and I thought, well, this doesn't look like a bad team. And I thought, maybe they are going to be a 83-84 win team is what I thought. I thought they were going to be sort of dancing around the periphery of the wild card chase, because I did not expect San Francisco to have one of the great seasons since John McGraw was the manager of the Giants. But I thought maybe they'll dance around the playoffs and they'll probably win more than they lose. And you take a look at how this season has unfolded, especially because for so long of the year, it was a foregone conclusion that there were going to be three teams coming out of the National League West. This is a combination of two things: a Reds team that got its act together and a Padres team that had an absolutely disastrous post-All-Star break.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one thing that the Reds have definitely benefited from is good fortune. But I mean, in a long marathon of a baseball season, you absolutely have to have some good luck along the way. Even the best of teams get bit by the injury bug. So to see the way that the Reds have responded in that, and they've currently been without their best hitter from last year, Jesse Winker, for the last 2 weeks. So they've been able to at least stomach that absence, and at the same point taking over that second spot in the wild card. It's been phenomenal to see, because all year long they've had one problem, and it's been the same whether you're talking about against good teams, bad teams, division teams, non-division teams, AL, NL, whatever. The Reds bullpen has been so shaky, and really here recently, thanks to a couple of the moves that they made to get Michael Gibbons from the Rockies, to get Luis Sessa and Justin Wilson from the Yankees, while those aren't marquee names, they've kind of helped stabilize this bullpen. That and the return from injury of Michael Lorenzen as well. It's been very interesting to watch them all come together, but the starting rotation has been the stalwart that has at least given them a baseline to begin each game with. Simply, they're not amazing like they were last year, but they're not bad either.
Well, let me just address the first topic you said, because it's one of the reasons why I think that it's always a bit of it's a fool's errand, I think, to basically try to say which team won the trade deadline as
Right.
it's still July, because some of the players who make an impact are not going to be the big, huge stars. And some of the players who don't make an impact are the really coveted players. I think that the trade, one of the early trades, it wasn't a deadline deal, but it was made, I think, maybe 2 weeks before the deal, was bringing in Wilson and Sessa from the Yankees. And I think that deal surprised a lot of people because Sessa was a good pitcher with the Yankees and he was kind of a popular pitcher amongst the Yankees. But there was the Yankees were in the middle of a flurry of moves, of which I talked about the other day. They remade the team and they kick-started Stanton. As I said, they essentially traded bad Stanton for good Stanton. But the move of bringing in Sessa and Wilson, and sad to say for me, saying goodbye to friend of the podcast Sean Doolittle, who found a new home in Seattle. They let go of some people who were going to be the anchors of the bullpen and remade the bullpen on the fly. Givens, Sessa, Wilson have all pitched really, really well
Yes, they
for
have.
their bullpen, which, sometimes you see a team rebuild on the fly. I remember the Giants did that in 1987 when they made a flurry of moves to basically they remade their pitching staff for the second half of the season. And the Reds feel like they did something eerily similar, at least with the pen, if not with the starting rotation.
I'm hopeful that it continues to be as successful as it has been because you're talking about they got these two guys for one player to be named later, and they still haven't named him. They're still waiting for that later name to be had. And with Sessa, he's not. I mean, Justin Wilson kind of makes sense. He's had a longer career and he's sort of in a downswing a little bit, things like that. But he's still been pretty serviceable. Sessa's young. Sessa's still got 2 years of team of control here that they've gotten for one player to be named later. So I think it was a very savvy move for a team that's been needing help all year long. I hated the fact that Doolittle didn't make it because he was easy to root for. He was a great guy in the locker room for them and all that good stuff, but he just didn't quite bring all of that stuff into the field with him. His fastball still had the low velocity on it, and he tried to develop a slider, but it didn't really have any sort of consistency for him. So he kind of ran into a lot of trouble there and just became a low leverage type reliever for them. So they kind of made it so that it was a little bit easier to move on. All year long, you've had some revolving names coming out of this, but we've had Jose De Leon, they've had Heath Embry, who really, for my money, was their best reliever for the
Mhm.
first half of this season. And then after the All-Star break happened, it's like he had been used so much that he just couldn't come in and do it anymore. Like you saw him get up on the mound and he was laboring through the first guy that he would see out of the bullpen. And you're like, what is going on with him? We're talking about a dude who had a 40% strikeout rate, like astronomical with that number. And then the other numbers were completely different. He really didn't make a lot of sense. And then you had other guys like Carson Fulmer. So to see these dudes coming in, it's a very huge deal because the whole season has been about how do you support this lineup that is very good at putting runs on the board, yesterday notwithstanding.
Now, let me ask you a question because for the second segment, I do want to break down the starting rotation because there's one aspect of the starting rotation which I think, I'll say it, is the most underrated player in the major leagues right now. But I'll
All
get to
right.
that in a second. That's a little tease for everyone right there. What is amongst Cincinnati Red Nation right now the opinion on David Bell? And what was it going into this year? I can only, again, as someone who's not a Reds fan, who's not in the thick of it, I'm not always the best judge of how a manager is doing because I'm not following with the day in and day out minutia. So, what is the thoughts on David Bell?
For my money coming into this season, I didn't know what I was supposed to know. Like, can this guy lead this team to postseason success? And sure, he hasn't had a chance to do that yet, so it's really hard to answer that question. I mean, other than last year with the 22 scoreless innings, and yeah, we won't get there. Hopefully, he can rectify that this year. It's going to be really hard, but
Just score
whatever.
a run. Just score a run. You've made an improvement.
Yes, exactly. But I think for what he has been handed so far as a roster is concerned, which was way more talented on the bat than on the pitching side of things, he has absolutely earned the right for the team to pick up that option for one more year. And I think kind of deserves maybe a year or two more on that contract. I really like what I've seen out of him. And so far as managers in this day and age that really try to marry analytics with gut feeling and how to run a baseball team and things like that, I think David Bell does a really good job. There's still plenty of criticisms to be had about which players he's really loyal to. I think that's probably his biggest weakness. I mean, as much as I love a Eugenio Suarez, he has over 420 at bats and he's batting $170. And 420. Like, that's just, we might have to be renaming the Mendoza line here soon. But I think that overall he has done a phenomenal job and absolutely deserves to helm this team for a few more years.
Well, let me tell you something. When this season began, the Reds were going into a top-heavy National League. Let's just call it a top-heavy National League. I think the Cardinals were heavily favored by most people, including yours truly. And they had lost the Cy Young Award winner, who I will not name. And I think that it would have been a real long shot bet to think the Reds were going to be in a position in late August, early September to be in a playoff spot. We are here with Mr. Jeff Francisco Carr. What is your middle name?
It's actually Frederick. You weren't that far off.
I knew it was an F. I knew it was an F, and I'm Francis. It seemed like, and so I decided to take a chance. But the Reds bullpen made up on the fly. David Bell, doing the job. But let's get down to what I think, especially when you consider after losing the man who shall be named, after losing Voldemort. The Reds starting pitching, especially during this stretch where they've caught up with the team that I picked to win the World Series, the San Diego Padres. And I really thought whether or not they're going to win the division or not, I actually picked the Dodgers to win the division, but the Padres to win the World Series as a wild card game. I did not see them stumbling. At some point this year, I thought they looked like one of the elite teams. I thought they had a shot at 100 wins. Yep. And then to see them come back down to earth. But in order to come back down to earth, someone has to be there to pick up the pieces. And one of the things that has made the Reds team, at least from an outsider looking in, so intriguing, and in so many ways this helps the bullpen, is that their rotation has been reliable. Even though Luis Castillo and Sonny Gray have not been aces, they've pitched well enough. Tyler Mahle, it's Mahle, right? Mahle. Yeah. Tyler Mahle has pitched well, but the most underrated player in all of baseball, I think, is Wade Miley, who is not being brought up at all in Cy Young conversations post DeGrom injury. Obviously, before DeGrom got hurt, DeGrom was the front runner to win the Cy Young Award. Since then, there was talk of Zach Wheeler, and there's talk of Max Scherzer, this, that, and that. I'm not hearing Wade Miley's name. I'm not a big sabermetrics guy, but he leads the league in pitching WAR at this point. And if you look up and down his stats, what he's doing for this team, both in giving them innings, giving them quality starts, and that in turn helps the bullpen. Having that ace, I think, has made the job of pitching so much better for Cincinnati.
He has been one of my favorite players on this team simply because in spring training, people were looking at him like, why is he still here? Why is he still on the roster? Why is he still slated to be a starting pitcher? Because last year, he wasn't too good. Now, a lot of it had to do with he kept dealing with a nagging groin injury, and that really kind of set him back for a 60-game season in which if you're beginning with a setback, you're probably not going to make it to where people expect you to be. So he comes in with a clean slate this year, despite some people having negative expectations of him, and goes berserk. And of course, he throws the no-hitter against the Indians, which was phenomenal to watch. A lot of fun. Means that I don't have to talk about Homer Bailey as the last no-hitter pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds.
Wait. Which Homer Bailey no-hitter?
The second one.
He's got two.
Yeah.
He's got two.
Yeah, it's the most confusing pitcher ever, Sully. But that's like a whole nother podcast.
I see your Homer Bailey and I raise you a Derek Lowe, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah, that's true. We could have a good one there.
All right,
but
cool.
when it comes to Wade Miley, he has been so phenomenally reliable simply because he limits hard contact. According to StatCast, he's in the top 5% of all pitchers when it comes to people's average exit velocity against him. And he has been awesome using the changeup and the curveball and the cut fastball really to keep everyone off balance. He doesn't throw straight pitches because they're not fast. You're not going to blow anybody away with Wade Miley's stuff, but for the simple fact that he pitches from that left side and is able to finesse around opposing hitters, he's been phenomenal. And he's so easy to root for too. I know that that's not a huge thing because at the end of the day, you want wins and losses. But even the other day, he had a bad start at home against the Marlins in which he didn't get out of the fifth inning. In that fifth inning, he was walking guys. He hit a batter to bring in a run. He walked in another run, things like that. And when he came off the mound, he was visibly upset. And he wasn't upset about David Bell taking him out. He understood that. He was upset at himself for the way that he performed. He just has so high expectations, and he brings the team with him whenever he pitches. It's fun to watch. I love a good Wade Miley start.
And, as I was trying to hint at before, having a pitcher like that, he doesn't pitch in a vacuum.
Right.
When he's on the mound, the lineup knows they don't have to super press. They can get their runs, but they know they don't have to put up an 8 or 9 spot to just win the game. And the bullpen knows that they're not going to throw a 4 or 5 inning game that day. And so when you have someone like that, and that takes pressure off of the pitcher before him and the pitcher after him, takes some pressure off the bullpen that they're trying to rebuild on the fly, takes some pressure off the lineup, takes some pressure off the manager. All those things happen. You know that 20% of your starts, I don't want to say you can relax, but you're not super pressed about everything because he does his job. And this is a season that's really come. He was an all-star back in 2012 with Arizona. And ever since that, he's bounced around. He was part of the Astros team that went to the World Series in 2019. He did play in the postseason for that team. He did play in the postseason for the Brewers the year before. But he bounced between the Red Sox, the Mariners, the Orioles, there's one other stop, the Brewers, the Astros. And so last year he was dreadful in just a handful of games. And you take a look at him this year, those out of the blue no-hitters are so fun, I think. Especially with Wade Miley through but here he is. And boy, if we went to Bet Online at the beginning of the year, I'm not doing another Bet Online spot here, but we went to Bet Online and said, I'm going to put my money down for Wade Miley to win the National League Cy Young Award.
Plus like 25,000, I think.
Yeah. Now imagine if the second Cy Young Award winner in Reds history is Wade Miley. Because for those of you who don't know, the Reds are a flagship franchise. They are a non-expansion franchise. That's what I'll just say. I don't want to say original, but like when the American
really
League
stinking old.
Yeah, they're old. They're old, and they haven't moved. Okay, so when the Cy Young was created in the 1950s, they were around. This franchise was around, and despite having some wonderful pitchers on the team along the way, they never had a Cy Young Award winner until what's his doodle last year.
That guy.
That guy won it last year, and then he skedaddled off to L.A., and the Reds avoided an ugly situation, kind of like Keanu Reeves avoiding that bullet in The Matrix. And so after all those years of not having a Cy Young Award winner, I think they should have back-to-back. I mean, if I have a vote, and I don't, but as of this recording, with about a month to go, I would vote Wade Miley as the National League Cy Young Award winner.
It's amazing to see, and he's got such composure too. I mean, obviously he's been doing this for a while, and like you said, he's been everywhere, so it's not as if he doesn't have experience to lay back on with this, but when guys get on base, like there's no change in his demeanor whatsoever. Like you don't see him take longer with pitches. In fact, one of my favorite memories of this season was he was pitching in San Francisco, and there was a shot where after a pitch, there was nobody on base, and he threw a curveball that a guy swung at, but it got past the catcher. Whatever, they're moving on to the next pitch. You see the bat boy come, run, grab the ball, and while he's still in the shot, Wade Miley goes into his windup. He just gets into this groove where he is like, let's go. I'm not wasting time, man.
Oh, that's great. I wish I had not seen that clip. I would love to have seen that clip. Oh, my God.
I'd love to go back and fish that out. It was great.
No pitch clock needed for him. And tell people where they can follow your terrific podcasts.
You can follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast, Sully. We're also on YouTube as well, so you can see my smiling face, my confused face, my concerned face, whatever face I'm making, especially after the Reds win. It's a lot of face, or after the Reds lose, it's a lot of faces. So that's going to happen tomorrow. But you can follow it on YouTube as well, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs, and you can follow the show at Locked On Reds.
3F Jeff. That's what we call you. You're 3F Jeff. And you can follow us on Locked On MLB Pods. You can follow me. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram.